Thanks for clicking on Wayne.com for Week 6's edition of Inside the Zone. We will be 2/3 of the way through after this Friday night. I think every week from now on out, I just do like a math update, statistical
Next
update.
week will be 7/9 of the way through.
Yeah, I'll have to ask. My daughter's in 7th grade. Your son's in what, 8th grade?
Yes.
They probably know fractions and to the nth power and all that good stuff. But we have in most conferences, I think last week was a real shakeout to figure out who is at the top of some of these conferences. What was your biggest takeaway from Week 5? Because we went ahead and looked into that slate and said, "Ooh, this is this is a put up or shut up week for a lot of teams." And we knew we had a great schedule last week.
Well, I think we learned that Adams Central is still the king of the ACAC. I know Bluffton's lurking there, but man, with the impressive performance that Adams Central was able to put on Heritage, you go, okay, we were undervaluing the Flying Jets if that's possible. We found that out, and we found that. Not only I think you look at Snyder and Carroll and you say those two teams are the best two teams in the SAC. You play that game 10 times. Does it go 5-5? I know Snyder won the game, but you take away 2 pick sixes and you're saying it's a different game. So I don't know if we can say Friday night that it clearly proved that Snyder was the better team because they were the better team on that night. But I think we could definitely say those are the two best teams by a considerable margin in the league.
But it's going to make a big difference, I think, at the end of the season when it comes to crowning who wins the victory bell.
Yeah.
Those 2 pick sixes in the final 2 minutes of the second quarter flipped the entire SAC season on its head to a certain degree.
They did, and it effectively decided the SAC. But then we look at it and say, okay, Bishop Luers is 3-0,
and they don't play Snyder.
They don't play Snyder or Carroll. So effectively, they could go 7-0 in the league and have to share it. So the first year, I mean, chances are this doesn't happen, but in the first year we could have we can't break this tie, which was kind of part of the issue with going into divisions and not everybody playing and going, how's this going to work? But it's setting up that Luers could be that team.
Yeah, they've still got Dwenger, Northside, and Homestead, I think in the final week.
Chances are that doesn't happen, but it's just kind of an interesting what if right now.
It's possible that it could. Both of those teams are 3-0, Snyder and Luers. Let's talk about the Northeast State, because that's where we're going to start this week, our Highlight Zone game of the week. 5-0 Columbia City, 5-0 New Haven. It's where I imagine everybody's focus is to a certain degree in Northeast Indiana. The NE8 has been a lot of fun this year, but we're starting to get down to the brass tacks of who is a contender and who is a pretender. Not that either of these teams are pretenders, but how do you see this one going? Because you got the reigning champ against a team that I think has an Ohio State recruit, and people say, if they play to their potential, New Haven might be the best team in this league.
Well, we've seen the other contenders in the NE8 play each other at least once this year so far, except Columbia City. And now they're going to get thrown into that, not just with New Haven, but East Noble and Leo coming up as well in week 7 and 8. So this is where we finally find out how good Columbia City is. And we've had to wait 5 weeks, 6 weeks to find out. And it is going to be a tough challenge to go on the road with New Haven. But you just kind of really don't know. You look at Columbia City, you're like, okay, you got Stratton Fuller. It's a really good run game like they had last year with multiple running backs that can carry the rock, a good offensive line. But how good are they really? And we really don't know, but we'll find out on Friday.
If you look at Brett Fox and the numbers that they're putting up offensively, they've been really impressive.
Yeah.
We know Stratton Fuller. You have James Getz back there. Caden Schrauf has been
4 touchdowns on Friday.
A revelation for them out of the backfield. But again, how much can you glean from what we've seen in weeks 1 through 5 based on strength of schedule for them?
It's tough because you can look at it and say, well, they've dominated their opponents, but their opponents aren't very good, at least in wins and losses. So you look at it, and you always ask the question with teams that are heavy run teams is say, okay, when a team is able to take that away, what kind of team are they? And can they pass and make enough completions downfield to move the chains? And I think that's the question. Does it happen this week? I don't necessarily know if it does, but you look at Columbia City and say eventually they're going to have to show something through the air. But so far so good that we were at this exact same point last year and seemingly the year before and the year before that with Columbia City. Last year they proved they were the best team in the NE8. It starts this Friday again to see if they can be the same thing.
For New Haven, I think the questions at the beginning of the year were twofold. Number one, can Donovan Williams take advantage and can they develop that passing game to the point where it's unstoppable given the weapons that they have on the outside? And secondly, do they make sure and not shoot themselves in the foot with penalties? And depth was an issue as well a little bit. So it feels like they've answered the bell every week so far. You know, we wondered in DeKalb, will they be overlooking the Barons? They went out and it was 42-7 at halftime. Yeah, they got back in it at the end, but I think they had taken their foot off the gas, had the Bulldogs. So when you take a look at New Haven, they've done nothing but live up to the expectations so far. How do they continue to do that in a week like this?
Well, I think the big thing is, and I know we talk so much about that offense, and for good reason, but I think the defense is what has gotten New Haven this far, because we knew they were going to be able to score points and be dynamic. And defensively, I think, and you look at it, okay, well, they gave up a lot of points at Leo, but they just make plays when they need to defensively. And two, they haven't had any of those real debilitating injuries, and hopefully, knock on wood, that doesn't happen for New Haven. It's not as they're deeper than they have been, but it's still, they're not taking the field with 80, 90 kids on Friday nights either. So for New Haven, it's to stay healthy and make plays defensively. And if they can do that and bottle up that run, that's the key thing. I think that defensive front seven is the key for New Haven on Friday night. Bottle up that run, make Grayson Bradbury beat you with his arm, and see what happens.
Let's talk about some of the other games. East Noble at Norwell, DeKalb at Huntington North, Belmont at Leo. I want to go back, actually. What did you think about that Leo-New Haven game? I guess I thought it was going to be a high score.
Right, it was 14-7.
It was 7-0 at halftime, and it ended up being 14-7 Leo over East Noble.
It was didn't go according to what I thought it was going to in terms of high scoring. But credit Leo, because they could easily have, after the emotions of losing at home in overtime to New Haven, taken that on the road to a Kendallville place. It's very difficult to play. East Noble's good. And it could have started steamrolling for Leo. But credit to that team and that coaching staff for get them ready to play. Turn the page from that devastating loss and get ready for a good East Noble team. So they did pretty good. And then also really creating turnovers. Xander Brazel threw a couple picks, and those were key. So it was a good bounce-back performance for Leo on the road.
It keeps Leo in the conversation for NEA champion, and it also, hands East Noble that first loss where they're going to have to beat New Haven down the road. So you know that's going to have to come to that head. Taking a look at the SAC, you got Snyder at Homestead, Dwenger at Northrop, Lures at Northside, Southside at Concordia, Wayne at Carroll. I guess Snyder at Homestead would be the most interesting game, although, I was in the first half of that Dwenger Homestead game, and I looked at the final score and I couldn't believe it because Homestead had played so well, and Dwenger had struggled to move the football, missed a field goal early in that one. But the Saints, they came back to win it. Have we counted them out a little too early in this season?
Well, yeah. After the first 2 weeks, losing to Moeller 57-0 was terrible. Worst loss in school history. And you're saying, wow. You look at this team, and they're not the vintage Bishop Dwenger team. I don't think any of us are kind of looking at them as that. But maybe they're not as bad as people thought. And maybe they're the third best team in the conference. It seems that conversation changes every week. But right now, you look at it and say, Bishop Dwenger, they got wins over Northside. They got wins over Homestead, the third best team in the league.
Yeah, they'll face Lures here coming up.
Yeah,
not too far away.
All of a sudden you look at Bishop Dwenger and finding their way, and maybe that's another instance of playing those two difficult games early in the season that can really pay dividends once you get to midseason. So, and conversely, Homestead, man, you get off to a fast start, you let that go, you lose Michael White in the second half. That kind of deflated your sails a little bit. Hopefully he's back and ready to go. But it's a follow-up. Snyder can't allow them to have an off game. Homestead's good enough to stick around if Snyder lets them. So Snyder has to make sure they don't have a let-up game after an emotional win over Carroll.
I want to jump to the ACAC because now it feels like we're waiting for Bluffton Adams Central.
Yeah.
Or for Bluffton Heritage as well.
Yeah.
When you take a look at, so you got the annual South Adams versus Adams Central Week 6.
Yeah.
Many times it's been our game of the week. It will not be this week.
Yeah, first time in how long have we not looked at this game as being, okay, this is where the ACAC's decided.
We circle and we're like, finally we get an ACAC game of the week. South Adams has struggled a little bit this season. Right now you would have to say they're probably the fourth best team in the ACAC. Last week we were wondering if Adams Central was going to answer the bell, and they did it in a big way. It was 35-0 in the second quarter.
Yeah, it was over.
38-0 was the final. What impressed you most about that, and can anybody compete with them in the conference now? Because they've owned the conference the last few years. We thought maybe this year the competition with Heritage and Bluffton had ratcheted up a notch to at least challenge them.
Right.
A big statement win in Monroe. I mean, it was
tough,
like, good Lord.
You love Coach Kolkman. You love Coach Brent Kunkel. I'm sure he's watching this. He's going to text me as soon as he watches. I have a hard time seeing anybody within 21 points of Adams Central right now. I mean, that was a really good Heritage team.
It
that went in
was.
there, and they can make some noise in the sectional for sure. And they just got absolutely blitzed off the field in the first half. And I was at Bluffton South Adams. Came away thoroughly impressed with the Tigers. And then I look at it and go, I don't see them matching up. And I know it's frustrating for every other fan base in the ACAC.
Yeah.
That's just how it is. I mean, Adams Central looks as good as they have each of the last couple of years. They look good enough to make another run to the state championship game. I think Bluffton has taken a step up. Heritage has taken a step up. But that final step is a Herculean jump.
Our photographer, Lucas, was at the game, and I remember telling him beforehand, I was like, we're staying for post on this game. I know it's kind of far away, but this would be like Game of the Week Part 2.
Yeah.
So, if we didn't have this big SEC showdown, Heritage, Adams Central, and he texted me, he goes, it's 35-0 at halftime. And I was like, Heritage
right,
or Adams Central? He was like, Adams Central. And I was like, wow.
Yeah.
I did not see it coming in that lopsided fashion. Let's take a look at the NECC. West Noble went on the road. I know we thought Fairfield might prove to be a threat last week. They beat them by 30. Lakeland, maybe with the offensive firepower that they've had, although the strength of schedule early on the season wasn't tremendous for the Lakers. But you've got West Noble at Garrett this week, Angola at Fairfield, Fremont at Busco, Central Noble at Lakeland, Eastside at Prairie Heights. Is this a case of the ACAC where you say West Noble is right here on the top shelf, and there might be a decent gap in between first and second?
I'm still looking forward to that West Noble Lakeland game.
Yeah.
Just because the points that Lakeland has been able to put up, against albeit inferior opponents, and then Garrett, of course, clipping them. But I think West Noble's the class of that league, big or small division right now. Fairfield tried to give them a game, hung around for a little bit, but really wasn't at the end. And you start looking at these potential games similar to what we did with Heritage and Adams Central. Like, we're just hoping for a good game, right?
Yeah.
And we didn't get it there.
Right.
Maybe we can get it with West Noble and Lakeland at this point. But you have to put the Chargers, particularly with the way that running game is it's just dynamic, and nobody's been able to keep up with it in the league.
I know I'm probably ahead of the game here, but how much do you start thinking about playoffs at this point? I know it's only week 6, and we haven't had the draw yet.
Yeah.
But how much do you start thinking about, okay, we got to get this geared up for the playoffs, especially if you're not in a conference race, say you're a smaller school in a big conference?
Every coach will tell you on the record that they're just focusing on next week and all this stuff, and they'll give you all the coach speak. But I can guarantee you more than a couple keep their eye on what's going on in the postseason and the teams they could potentially play.
Especially, I would think in 4A.
Oh, yeah.
In this area.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially when you can see a lot of these teams you're playing in your section or whatever. But I guarantee you they're scoreboard watching. They're looking at film. They're looking at this stuff. Like, they're not going to admit it because they're always going to say, oh, we're focused on Friday. They don't want their kids looking ahead. But
One game at a time.
Exactly. Coaches are looking at it. If not them, they have assistants doing it.
That's
because
true.
when they do draw and they can pick up the phone and say, okay, tell me about Cherubusco, and you have a coach that can do it.
What are you most looking forward to about this week 6? Because last week was a real separator in terms of how the conferences stacked up. What do you think is going to be important this week, and what are you looking forward to here in week 6 when you look at the slate?
Well, we finally get to see how Columbia City matches up. And conversely, New Haven, because if you look at if Columbia City is very well the best team in the league again, let's see how New Haven can match up. So we got answers with Snyder and Carroll last week, lived up to the hype. We hope that very same thing in a battle of undefeateds on Friday in New Haven.
Justin Kenny always living up to the hype right here on Inside the Zone every Monday. And we've exhausted almost 6 weeks of football.
Yeah, how about that? We'll keep bringing it every Monday.
We'll keep bringing it every Monday here on Inside the Zone. For Justin, I'm Glenn, and we'll see you next week.